Hello, leaders. Welcome to 2026 Blueprint. And what is that? Leading the agentic workforce. So, this year, work is being reshaped faster than ever before. Humans and AI agents are now the new co workers. Skill cycles are shrinking, and leadership has a completely different meaning now. And to make kind of sense of this shift which is happening, we have brought in someone, not someone, but a very special one who is not just watching the transformation, but he's driving it. As Vice President of People and Culture, I've got Lakshminarayanan. We call him LV. He has been leading teams through AI adoption. He's redefining talent strategy and building the next generation of workforce where people don't just use AI, but they orchestrate it. Lakshmi, great to have you here.
Hey, thanks. Thank you, Rishikesh. As you rightly said, yeah, I work for a fintech firm, been with more into IT industry and ITS. Currently, as you rightly said, I head the HR for an organization which is called as Quinte Financial Services, which is a US-based fintech firm. Thanks to having me, Rishi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LB, for joining us. We'll jump straight in. So, looking back from where we stand today in 2026, what surprised you the most about the transformation that you saw in 2025?
Thank you. It's a good question. One thing which, first and foremost, great to be here. But if I had to pin it down, the biggest surprise wasn't actually the technology. It's how quickly the skill shelf life has really dropped. What I mean by that is in 2022 and 2023, a developer was set for 2 years if they knew a particular stack. By the end of 2025, that window is completely closed. If somebody is really not upskilled, the upskilling happening now is every 6 months, every month, and you're essentially falling behind, right? So we have to move from a hiring for experience to hiring for learning velocity. We just don't look at people who know things, but we need people who can fastly unlearn and relearn again, right? That's the essence which we are looking at. And that's a transformation which is happening right in front of our eyes.
And that is so truly said. Like hiring for experience to hiring for learning velocity.
Right.
And I think people who are in their 40s and 50s, have to quickly have that velocity like now.
Yeah, very true.
Right. So we have now stepped into 2026, but looking back at 2025 from today's vantage point as an HR head in an IT sector, what stands out as the most expected shift of the last year?
See, I'll tell you what, the bigger shift which has pretty much happened is previously when COVID came in, we all spoke about remote versus coming to office. That debate is kind of settled now, right? Now the shift is all about skill agility. So in 2025, knowing a programming language like Java or Python is just an entry ticket, right? That goes even for 2026. But the real value is how to work with AI agents to get the code faster and cleaner. In fact, in most of the firms now, they are looking at, in fact, they have stopped testing candidates just who really are able to just execute the syntax. We have started looking at people who are problem solvers who can guide the AI to write a code. We are moving into a culture from coding to, I would say, curating. So what I mean by that is the person who knows what to ask a mission is much more valuable than a person who just knows where to put the semicolon or where it really goes, right? That transformation, a shift has pretty much happened. And that's the bigger shift which has happened, at least in the not just the IT firms, but across the industry as such.
Yes. And when we talk about it, it kind of leads to the vibe shift, which everyone is talking about in the IT talent management. So what does it look like on the ground?
See, there are few things which are happening, okay, in terms of the vibe shift. When you look at the vibe shift, the first thing which comes in mind, right? There are two things which are happening. One, the power balance is shifted, right? The conversation has shifted. The culture of work has shifted. Today's IT talent isn't just asking for benefits. They are asking for belonging. They're asking for a balance, bandwidth, and business value, right? There is a very clear shift from a skill demand to a skill proof. So earlier hiring was all about titles, right? Now it is a proof of capability, the tech assessment, the gig assignments, the pair programming, live problem solving. These are certain things which are coming out now, right? Second is there is a shift which is moving from work for us versus work with us. What I mean is employee wants the partnership, not the hierarchy to a larger extent, right? That's how they really look at. And there's a career movement as well. In terms of career movement, what I mean is it's moved away from a linear career to a portfolio career. The talent mobility, which a Gen Z wants today, is they want internal gigs, they want cross-functional exposure, they really want parallel experiences. Today, a cloud engineer today, right, he wants to dabble into Gen AI for tomorrow. That's a jump which is not just normal, but very disruptive. That's the vibe, is the dimensional growth. And last but not the least, one thing which is happening in terms of the org is the presence culture to performance culture. What I mean by that is hybrid isn't a benefit anymore. It's like a baseline expectation which pretty much comes in. What matters today is not the attendance, right? Previously, attendance used to be tracked. It's the output which gets tracked now. These are the bigger changes, the vibe which is pretty much happening. It will continue in 2026 as well, Rishikesh.
And we see, a lot of the CXOs are kind of constantly worried about productivity. So how is HR actually helping the bottom line, especially in IT and ITES sector?
Good question. Thank you for that. See, the one thing is from the olden days, the HR has pretty much evolved. They are now seen as a data partner for the C-suite. So they need to be seen rather. We aren't looking at login hours or attendance anymore or managing, say, payroll. We are going to measure the cognitive load. What I mean by that is if our tech teams, for example, are toggling between multiple tools or attending status update meetings that AI could in a way summarize, right? The productivity drops because the brain gets tired and they are not going to be useful in that anymore, right? Now, the example is, in fact, we recently ran an audit application. In fact, it happened in my previous org. We found that some employees were switching between 10 to 20 apps a month. By simplifying the tech stack and cutting the tool noise, we saw a jump of 10 to 12% jump in the delivery speed without hiring a single extra person. That is, HR is directly impacting the bottom line, right? That is what the CXOs needs to be looking at as such.
Yes.
And that's where the value add of what the HR does for the CXOs comes in.
This is a very insightful example, actually, right? Kind of it directly impacts the bottom line.
Absolutely.
And what should a CEO or CTO look forward in 2026 regarding their people strategy?
Okay, good question. See, there are two words for it, right? When I look at it, right, regarding the people strategy, two words is hyper-personalization. The days of one size fits all HR policies are absolutely dead. They are not relevant anymore. In 2026, the best talent won't stay for a generic employee of the month program. They will end up staying for companies that can offer them a, I would say, customized career path, which is powered by data. Think of it like a Netflix of your career, right? If a system sees a backend engineer spending his or her free time in learning, say, UI, UX modules, right? The HR platform should be able to automatically pick up and suggest a movement into a product management, even before the employee thinks of resigning, right? We need to predict their next move to keep them with us. And that's the change which is happening. And that is where, CTOs and CEOs can look forward with respect to the people strategy. Hyper personalization is real.
And how do you think so clearly, LB? Because, I love the clarity that you have in your thoughts. Like, how do you keep yourself updated with all the things which is happening across?
See, two, three things which comes in. I do have a subscription of Harvard Business Review and Gartner. See, Gartner and Harvard Business Review gives you much more insight. And second important thing is there are networking forums like Dawdle, right? There is one big example, right? That forums give you that leverage of not just meeting with my own peer group, but across the industry. In fact, in one of the discussions, I had podcast with somebody from the business. So the insights also comes from the business, not just from your peer population. But it is a cross-functional knowledge with these kind of forums provide, right? That is the huge valuable insight which anyone can ever get. At least leaders like me get that enough insight to take us forward rather. Thanks for that, by the way.
Thanks so much, LV, for mentioning us. Everyone is talking about agentic AI. Now, what is agentic AI? That the AI that doesn't just chat, but actually executes the tasks. So how does this change the way in which you hire?
See, there are two things to it, right? One, everyone is really talking about it, but as you rightly said, it's something which is like a buzz term which is going on currently, right? So when you say how is it going to change the way we are going to hire, first is agentic AI is going to overrule any of the rule-based tasks like your sourcing, your screening, scheduling, and anything like a resume filtering, right? That will give you enough leeway for the recruiters to focus on judgment, context, and stakeholder alignment, right? In fact, when I read in Gartner, since I mentioned about Gartner, right? Gartner is, there is a article which is written in Gartner which is saying that AI is already reshaping how organizations assess talent. It is pushing the recruiters towards more complex and a higher judgment work as such. It further highlights that AI agents can automatically screen, source, engage the candidates, freeing up the human space, that human space which is occupied by relationship driven tasks. So what I mean by that is once the agentic AI comes in, rather it is just a matter of time, recruiters need to AI orchestrate the skills, not your admin skills. So in a way, it will define how the recruiter is going to move away from an executor to an orchestrator. What I mean by that is managers and leaders now, they will have enough bandwidth to build a rapport. They will have enough bandwidth to look at the right set of profiles which needs to come in, look at whether the person is really a cultural fit. That gives you enough amount of bandwidth. The volumes are handled by the AI, but the human part of it is going to be handled by the recruiters. That will continue for some more time.
And with all this automation coming in, do employees actually feel replaceable? And how do you keep the soul of, keep the soul in the company?
See, let me just put it in two ways, right? One is, it's not about replaceability. It's all about how do it's about how can they really learn and continuous growth loops. An example is in a fast paced ITAs or IT world, right? Waiting for, say, a 12-month feedback is like looking at a weather report for last year to decide what's the weather report today, right?
Mm, mm,
But 26, the performance management has become more predictive. The
mm,
system will not just tell us what we have done, it will tell us what skill you need for the next project even before it pretty much starts, right?
mm,
So organizations are using like a AI powered pulse system. If a
mm,
developer finishes a sprint or agile, he comes out of it, right? It automatically highlights what's the skill gap which a developer has. Where is it that he has really struggled, right? So there is nothing called as a bad rating anymore. AI nudges them to do like a quick snippet of 15 or 30 minutes micro learning module, which needs to be done by certain time. So the appraisals needs to be turned from a scorecard to a career aggregator or a career accelerator, right? It needs to be real time. It needs to be fair. It needs to remove the recency bias. Being the humans or the supervisors, the trust factor. Manager will pretty much deliver the feedback, but the data is given by the entire set of systems or ecosystem. So in a way, if employees does not want to feel replaceable, they need to upskill. They need to use the AI as a leverage or a tool to make their own value ecosystem in the organizations. That's how it should work, Rishikesh.
yes. And there has been a lot of talks around this great flattening, in 2025. With all these AI agents handling coordination, what happens to the traditional middle manager in an IT company?
See, traditionally, the middle manager used to spend around 60% of the time on information routing, right? So basically, status updates, coordination with the customers, coordination with the internal team. Today, that particular role or a job, AI agents can do that better. So the role is shrinking in terms of quantity, but growing in terms of quality. So we
Mm,
are moving away from a managers to a T-shaped leaders. So what I mean by that is there are people who have got deep tech expertise, but also the cross-functional ability to connect AI, data, and human ethics. An example would be that I have seen organizations which had a project lead managing 10 analysts. Today, the lead manages just 3 analysts in a fleet of around 10 odd AI agents,
mm,
right? When I say 10 odd AI agents, the job is moved away from logging in hours to more like an adversarial testing, right? The
mm,
person spends time trying to find whether the AI logic might fail or where the human in the loop is needed to prevent any biased decisions. So the
mm.
person becomes more like a value architect and not just a task tracker, which used to happen earlier. That's the huge shift which has happened. Rather, it's happening as we speak.
And we always kind of think of annual appraisals as such a big event in HR. We keep on waiting for that month of March or February. Now we are in 2026. Is the yearly review really there, or is kind of finally dead?
See, the short answer is yes, in spirit, it's certainly there, but in practice, it is being replaced, not like removed completely. The
Mm,
annual review system isn't dead, but it is no longer I would say, primary performance mechanism, right? It is shifted from being just a event to being one of many inputs in a continuous performance ecosystem or a cycle.
mm,
So the yearly reviews has lost certain amount of credibility with both the managers and talent, right? Employees used to feel the yearly reviews are very slow for their work cycles,
mm,
especially in IT and ITS firms where your skilled roles and project velocities shift every quarter,
mm,
right? But now it has moved more into a continuous mechanism. So what I mean by that is organizations use their monthly check-in, monthly conversations, quarterly calibrations, and real-time feedback loops. So
mm,
this is much faster in terms of coaching, much faster in terms of skill correction, anything in terms of aligning with the agile sprints and delivery cycles. That is
mm,
something which is coming in. One thing which has also come out is the OKR dashboards and AI assisted insights have replaced the old documented rituals which we used to have or which we used to follow at one point of time. I think the conversations which used to happen, once a year, the decision happens once a year. Now that is kind of closed and it is happening more continuous. That's a huge shift or change which has happened. And will continue to happen. AI is going to give us the data. The manager is going to take the data, then add value to the conversations what they're having on.
And in the last, kind of a year or so, we are seeing a lot of hue and cry around campus hiring because entry level jobs, they say, are disappearing because of AI agents. What is your view? Like, what does it mean for campus hiring?
See, there is an interesting movement which is happening in India as such, right? The entry level jobs are not disappearing as such, but they are evolving. The manual, repetitive checklist, right, with checklist driven entry level roles are definitely shrinking. But the demand for early career talent who can really think, question, design workflows, and supervise AI agents, that is rising. So instead of hiring for execution capacity, we now hire for something like a judgment capacity, right? Let me put it in that way. So campus hiring is not going to go away, but it has become more intentional. So we are no longer asking freshers to do some low value grunt work. We are asking them to work with AI. It's an AI assisted problem solvers from day one. The bar is shifted from knowledge of tools to comfort, which you are able to perform with ambiguity, data literacy, and the orchestration skills. One example I can really tell you is, I know of an organization which has launched like your Agentic apprenticeship program for fresh graduates. So what they've done is they've done it in a way that week 1 and 2 would be more like learn how to really use and govern AI, right? AI agents rather. They will end up doing it. Week 2 or week 3 to 6 is more about, work on a human in the loop and so on. Week 7 to 12 is they kind of own the real workflow with 3 to 5 AI agents. So what has now happened is previously, once the training is done, the billing hours for the organization, it used to take around 4 to 6 months. That has gone down from 4 to 6 months to around, 4 to 6 weeks. So imagine the change which is caused. Just a month versus some 90 days to 120 days, which used to happen earlier. That is the shift which has happened in campus. So our young engineers who are coming out need to upskill themselves and get ready for the changing trends and industry.
Yes, even the college curriculum needs to change, like in a
Absolutely.
big way. Right. And now we'll come to learning and development part. So you mentioned that the learning velocity concept had changed. And how has this learning velocity thing had changed the way that training budgets, learning cycles, and employee journeys are actually designed?
See, one thing in about learning velocity, right? One thing to be kept in mind is organizations have stopped that big bang approach or big bang training sessions. In 2026, budget will follow more like your just in time, right? We don't train everyone for a complete year. We train for a particular sprint which is coming up. So that is a big shift which has pretty much happened. And one or two important key things which is happening is the fund for the learning, which used to happen in the yearly beginning, etc. Right? That used to be for certain subscriptions, etc. Now that is going to become micro learning burst. The classroom programs may not be existing. I don't know whether people really do the classroom programs now, but yeah, that's not going to happen. The flavor which the company is looking at is more like a high frequency but low unit cost digital upskilling. That is the line which they're looking at. And learning has gone away from being like a capex to an opex. You fund it in the moment the skill gap appears, right? Not at the start of some financial year. That's the bigger thing. And on the learning journey for an employee, right? So employee journeys used to be very linear, right? Somebody onboards, then the probation happens, then year 1 and 2 of the career journey and so on, right? Now that is upgraded into your paths in terms of a gaming system. Every level unlocks a new capability. That is how it's looking like. And third thing which has also happened is high learning velocity, right? The employee are able to prioritize their growth, mobility, and leadership, right? Previously, there were changes, right? You are no longer promoting any experienced guys. You're promoting somebody who's rapidly skilled right now. That is how it's kind of really changing it. So potential is no longer a guess, but learning velocity makes it much more measurable, Rishikesh. That's how the changes which has happened as such.
Right. And now, we'll talk a bit about leadership because in this world where AI is handling execution and humans are kind of expected to handle judgment, what does leadership mean in this kind of a world? And how are you preparing leaders for such kind of a shift?
Very, very important question. In fact, in 2026, right, leadership is no longer about knowing the most or doing the most, right? It's about judging the most. So when AI handles the execution layer, leaders shift from being a task managers to being a sense makers. Their job is to provide the clarity, ethics, narrative, and direction in a world where information is extremely abundant and decisions are increasingly machine focused or machine assisted, right? So, at least in our organizations, we're preparing the leaders to excel in four areas. One is system thinking, seeing how humans, AI agents, and the process interact. Second is ethical judgment, knowing when an AI should decide, when a human should decide or intervene, right? That is extremely important as such, right? When we are doing it. Third is there is a narrative leadership which happens, right? Translating a complex AI outputs into, say, a story teams and customers can really trust that, right? That is extremely important. Last but not the least, there is also a AI governance. So being able to challenge a model, question a pattern, set guardrails. In short, in 2026, leaders should not ask, how do I get the work done? They should ask, how do I ensure the right work is done ethically, transparently, and intelligently? That's the shift we are coaching for.
Yes. I remember you telling this in one of the, roundtable sessions that we had.
Roundtable podcast. Yes, absolutely. I echo that again.
Yes. And has the definition of top talent changed in 2026? Who do you consider a high potential?
Absolutely. The top talent in 2026 isn't the fastest individual contributor, right? That is how it used to be previously, right? It is the strongest orchestrator. So in an agentic workplace, right, we value people who can turn ambiguity into outcomes by designing workflow for AI agents, able to apply ethical judgments and scale up, or rather scaling up impactful teams. Higher potential now means somebody who is very adaptive, data literate, ethically grounded leaders or managers or employees who can move fluidly across domains and convert any of the messy problems into a very good repeatable systems, right? So we look for five signals for a top talent, right? Or a higher potential to a larger extent. One is we look at the learning velocity, somebody who is able to unlearn and relearn very fast because the skill life is much, much shorter right now. Somebody who is an agent orchestration, they should be able to design multi-agent workflow, set guardrails, and know when to override it. Somebody who is very good in maybe a decision quality, balance of a speed with risk, customer trust, and a long-term value as such. And another important thing is a system and data literacy, right? They should be able to read the metrics, question models, and improve pipelines, not just the task. Last but not the least, one important thing is the cultural multipliers, right? They, as a leader, somebody should be leader or a manager, they should be able to raise the psychological safety, mentor across functions, and make AI much more, make the ethics much more practical. All these are equally important, Rishikesh.
And finally, if you are in a boardroom with a CEO and a CTO, what's your big warning for 2026?
Thank you. So my view is do not over automate and lose your culture. 2026 will be a year of great refinement. That's what I call it. So CXOs need to stop asking how much money can we save with AI, right? They should rather start asking how much can we innovate with our people. Maybe we end up saving 30% of cost by replacing certain departments with AI, but you might end up losing 100% of your innovation potential if there are no humans left to dream up the next big product, right? What is important is balancing is the key, which I would rather recommend or give it as a caution to the CXOs as such.
Thank you so much, LV, for joining us and sharing all these insights with us. Always a pleasure. And we are extremely grateful, LV, that you have been supporting this initiative right from the beginning. Thank you so much for joining us and taking out your time.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity as well, Rishikesh. Thank you for that. Thank you.